Just about now. Hello, my name is Amanda Risky, and I'm going to be the host this evening for the Global Online Math Department. I'm just going to tonight we're going to hear from Kari Ferguson and Jen Thomas about ELL strategies for a regular high school math classroom. Would everyone please introduce themselves in the chat window, telling us what you teach, where, and what your Twitter handle is if you have one. Before I introduce our speakers, let me explain a little bit about how these meetings work. These meetings are recorded and available a few hours after the meeting ends. To view the recording, come back to the same URL link that you got, and the Global Math Department community prides itself on being friendly and supportive. And the chat room that's available is topical and general conversation throughout the meeting. I will also catch your questions for the presenters, so don't worry if they didn't notice within their presentation. We will get to it later on. Also, there is a Q&A part. You can look there. I see Anna Marie. She introduced herself there. So if you want to go to the chat area to put in your chat questions, comments that you can see. Sometimes people post links or talk about some of their experience as well. There's also going to be a handout tonight, so I do want to draw your attention to that rectangle that you can click on handout towards the end. Jen and Kari will also direct you there when they get to that part of the presentation. And please let me know if you have questions along the way due to technology as well. But I'll be catching the questions that you have for the presenters and share them with them as well. Great. Now, our speakers for tonight are Kari Ferguson, who attended Illinois State University and got her bachelor's degree in secondary math education, and Concordia University for her master's in curriculum and instruction, in addition to IRC, where she got her ELL endorsement. This is her 9th year of teaching at Layden High School, and she will correct me if I pronounce that wrong, and her 11th year of teaching overall. She currently teaches geometry, sheltered geometry, and sheltered algebra, and this is her 7th year of teaching ELL math. Kari is a proud mother of 2 beautiful girls. Jen Thomas attended the University of Illinois, where she attained her bachelor's degree in math with a minor in secondary education. She earned her master's degree in curriculum and instruction, which included her ELL and special education endorsement at National Louis University. This is her 8th year of teaching at Layden High School, which is her 9th year of teaching overall. So they've been colleagues for a while. Currently, she teaches Algebra 2, Sheltered Algebra 1, and Calculus AB. This is her start of her 6th year of teaching ELL, and she's engaged and looking forward to getting married in March. And without further ado, I will get them talking about ELL strategies to use in the high school math classroom. There might be a little bit of a hiccup. Can you both speak just to make sure I get the microphones right?
Hi.
Wonderful.
Hi.
Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to you two.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Kari Ferguson, and I just wanted to kind of introduce of how we got involved in teaching ELL. And basically, about 6-7 years ago, we were approached in regards to getting our ELL endorsement, and we went to the IRC, we took the classes, we completed it in about a year, year and a half, and we entered into this world that was completely brand new to us. So I was the first one to dive into it. And then Jen and our colleague Natalia also followed us a year later. And, you know, we were told to follow the Algebra 1 curriculum, but do what we had to do to teach these students. Just a quick little story. I remember in my first year of teaching ELL math, I had an observation with the principal in my room, and I got a new student. It was about a month into school. She was from Bulgaria. She spoke no English, and I had to kind of welcome her and continue class and hope I did well on my observation. And it was actually one of the best things that happened for me, because my principal was able to see what a typical day could be like in an ELL classroom, and kind of how we adapt to that. So it's basically our world. So I've enjoyed it greatly, and I definitely think I've learned a lot and grown over the years. And I hope that we can fill you in on a lot of the ways that we've done this. So I'll let Jen kind of introduce her a little bit and explain what our presentation is going to be about, and then we'll go into more detail for you. So thank you.
Again, my name's Jen. So like Harry said, we kind of got thrown into this, but once we kind of learned what we were getting ourselves into, we really fell in love and really enjoy what we're doing. And what we realized is what she said earlier, we became better teachers because this is something we apply to our regular classes now. These are a lot of skills that we can use to support any student, whether they're ELL, regular, special education, anything. It really just helps students learn better is what we've realized with different formatting. So a quick summary of what we're going to go over today is that we notice that students need more literacy support in a math classroom, whether it is different languages, their math abilities, and for us, we have a lot of different global perspectives and just a much wider audience. So through examining different practices, we figured out that formatting really can help support our students by considering the global relevance, the background knowledge, language prior to their content, process-oriented strategies, and systematic checks for understanding. So together, the strategies of framing and formatting create successful opportunities for students in our math classes. So just to give you a background of kind of our students and where we come from. So there's an East and West Leiden, but all the students from both campuses that are ELL come to us. So if you see here, this is just showing we have about 800 students of Spanish speaking, 500 that are English speaking, and so on. So we have a lot of variety. It's not just Spanish, it's not just Polish. We usually have at least 4 to 5 different languages in a classroom, which is definitely very challenging, but also a fun challenge to take on. So we're always learning something new about their cultures. So this is not something for, nationally versus, U.S. So what we learned or noticed is that just because they're ELL doesn't mean they were born in another country. So we have 32% of our ELL students were actually born in America and are just still working on their English, whether it's literacy or speaking it or whatnot. But it's actually nationally 56%. And then we also have born outside is the majority, but still 63%, which is a lot less than we expected.
So one thing that I want to talk to you about is the classroom environment, and I'm going to actually explain what a sheltered classroom is. So at our school, we talk about our students are called sheltered algebra, sheltered geometry, sheltered algebra 2, and it's basically just all the ELL students in our school are placed in that classroom. Something that we try to make very clear to our students, our parents, our staff, and the counselors is that sheltered does not mean easier. Basically, sheltered is just these students have tested with the access tested and their home language might not be English, and they are testing into an ELL program. So we do the exact same curriculum. We do the exact same test. However, we modify certain strategies and our teaching styles as we go through it. We've had many students approach us before and say, I think this class is too easy. I want to be in a regular algebra class. And we tell them, this is a regular algebra class. You are just giving more support. We are helping you more. We're explaining things more. And we're really working on your speaking, your writing, and all of that. So if there's any more questions on that, feel free to ask us, and we can go into detail on that a little bit later. I want to explain what our typical classroom environment is. One classroom could have students anywhere from ELL level 1 to 4. So ELL 1, they're coming in with little to no English, and then 4, their English is really well, their writing as well. They might have a strong accent. Their levels of math are very different. You can have some high, some low, and the hard part is understanding the math that they've already had in their home country. I've had students where their transcripts just say math. It's very vague, and we don't understand necessarily if they've completed geometry or algebra. Some of them say it's all intermixed. So by getting to know our students, we can also get to know their levels. For instance, I had a student from, she was Vietnamese, and she was flying through my algebra. And, I had a conversation with her, and we ended up taking her out of algebra, putting her in pre-calc. Within a week, we took her out of pre-calc, put her in calc AB. She was so far advanced, but based on getting to know our students, we learned this quickly about her. Our students, are we good? Our students are very open with us, and they express their lives openly to us. They tell us about their problems, the good, the bad. They connect with us. To them, school is a safe zone. We are their safe zone. Our room is their room. And when others enter, a lot of times they're like, who is this? Why are they coming into our room? They're very loud. Our ELL department chair does not, count this against us, because these students know each other. They connect with us. They laugh with us. They respect us, but they all have classes together. So it is a louder environment. Many of these students are always at school. We have little attendance issues, which is nice because this is where they want to be. They like to come here. Their parents have moved here for them to get a good education. And one other thing is, so we're a part of the math department, and we're also a part of the ELL department. And we have a few meetings throughout the year where every subject who teaches ELL meets together. So last week, the science teachers, the English teachers, the math teachers, we were all together in one room. And this is nice because we are able to go ahead and discuss students and their behavior. We can talk about the curriculum and maybe how it relates to each other. And, in science, they're struggling with this. Have you covered this concept? And we don't get to do this very often. And this is amazing when we can. And when someone knows an issue of a student who's working, until 3 a.m. or a student's going home every day and babysitting, or a student's parent has passed away, we can share certain information with each other. And obviously we know certain things that's not appropriate to share in writing and everything, but it's a great way for us to learn more information about our students. This is something that we've done in the past in presentations. We're not going to do it right now, but what we've done is we have asked people in our presentation to just turn to someone, speak with a partner, but you're not allowed to use the letter N. And you get a lot of laughter during this, and it's kind of challenging. So if you sit here and you think about a sentence or a question you'd want to ask me, but you're not allowed to use the letter N, you'd actually find it's kind of challenging. And the reason we do this is it's kind of how our students process things. When you're speaking another language, you have to constantly think about the context and the vocab and the meaning of words. And it is a challenge. And when we first did this activity, we're like, wow, this is what they feel like, a lot of times. And it was kind of an eye opener for me. So it's a fun activity if you ever do it with your colleagues or even your students. It's kind of a nice thing to get to know. So.
And then real quickly before I go over this, I want to answer a question. So a lot of our ELL students in our Sheltered Algebra 1 are mostly ELL 1 and ELL 2. And so it's really nice to have them for their first year in high school. There's a lot of changes going on to help build their confidence, not only in math, but in English, so that after their freshman year of algebra, we can see if, they're confident enough, strong enough in their English to push into a more regular classrooms where they need less support and really excel their learning of English, or is their math or English not where that needs to be yet, and we keep them there. But again, it's kind of an advantage having them all together because they are more comfortable and they're more willing to talk. If they were in a classroom with everyone else who's fluent in English as their first language, they're much less likely to try to answer questions and try to speak and explain things. So that's why I found it really a huge advantage. So one of the other things we learned when starting to teach ELL is that math language has many different meanings, whether it's in the math classroom or outside. So just take a second, think, what are different words that you found that might have multiple meanings? So this isn't only a struggle for ELL students, this is a struggle for all students. So for a couple examples that we thought of were mean could be, average versus, a bad behavior, or something, or the sum of adding things together. And so that's something we started focusing on and making sure that we talk about that there are multiple meanings and that they, it's okay to have two different meanings, but that they understand what both of them are and how to use them both separately. So here are some of the math practice standards. So the ones that are bolded are the ones that we covered the most, or the ones that we're going to focus on today. So number 1 says make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. So one of the really big things we've worked on this year is to scaffold less. So we used to bold things more, break down problems, and now we're trying to help them learn how to persevere through problems by giving them a lot more reading, a lot more writing, and struggling through it. And then after we let them struggle for a little bit, then we help them scaffold and work through the problem. As I said, we're including a lot of reading and writing. The writing is usually constructing a viable argument where they're saying they agree or they disagree and, explaining why or why not. So really making sure that they have a strong understanding of the mathematical content. And then we attend to precision and look for and make use of structure. And so a lot of that too, we have a lot of structure in the classroom to make sure it's predictable, but we also structure how we present things, and we look through it and plan in advance to make sure that we're covering it in a way that can make sense to the students.
Really quick, I had seen that someone asked about credit for Algebra 1, and they do earn credit. This is a regular math class. So at our school, they're required to complete 3 years of math. And Algebra 1 does count as one of their years. And as Jen went through the standards, we have an ABCD framework that we follow, where we have to talk about the audience, the behavior, and we go through all the math priority standards by unit. And we basically make sure we follow each standard that we need to cover in algebra. So when they complete the course, that it is appropriate that they are earning this credit. Also, we do have a lower level class than algebra that we do offer our students. We have a transitional algebra, and that's for our ELL students. And we also have an algebra block, and that's for students not in algebra who need a little bit more of the, the re-explaining of the concepts. So I just wanted to answer that question real quick.
And we'll cover later on too, we're actually this year trying to add in the opportunity of having honors credit as an option in our ELL, our sheltered Algebra 1 class, which we'll discuss at the end of our presentation. And so when we started teaching ELL math before us, they pretty much gave one teacher all of the ELL math classes and said, do what you can. And then when we were able to take on these classes, we made sure that we have the same standards as a regular class. We just change how we teach it. We don't change the content. So we did that by changing our teaching style, having the kids work more together, having them talk more, read more, write more. And then we did have to really adapt the current curriculum. And so some of it we kept the same, but a lot of it just looks different, but it's the exact same content, the exact same difficulty, the same rigor as a regular class. And so different supports we have really helped our ELL students, but also our special ed students. So a lot of the regular Algebra 1 teachers have taken our sheltered stuff because they can use that to better help support their students who are low with literacy or any special ed students. And so then we started thinking, where do our students struggle? Why is this different than teaching a regular student?
So I actually saw that someone here, and there might be multiple people, was an instructional coach. And we have this at our school. So basically what we have is someone called a literacy instructional coach. And Jen and I have worked closely with her for many years now. We first joined our program at our school. It was a 2-year program, and you worked with a coach one-on-one with your teaching. We had a few meetings a year where it was a big group, but most of the time you just worked one-on-one with these coaches. And it was really nice because you can sit down with them and have chats about difficulties you're having or things that are going well. They would sit in on our classes. They would sit in groups and interact with the students to kind of get more of a feel of, you know, what was going on in your classroom. Did they understand? Did they have questions? And working one-on-one with a literacy coach really led us into this whole presentation, and it led us into our teaching style and what we do. We focused on the what, the why, and the how. And we're going to talk about this in great detail pretty soon. And what this kind of led us to is how we should structure our lessons for our ELL students. And as Jen stated before, you know, the work is not easier. It's just structured differently. And what I'm going to say is that the curriculum that Jen and I have created is now being used by multiple teachers in a regular classroom that has non-ELL students, that has special ed students. And so I think the work we're doing is great for many levels. So when we worked with a literacy coach, this what, the why, the how, explain your answer is something now that we do like every day in class. So one thing I did with a literacy coach is we did something called a think aloud. If you've never done a think aloud, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most beneficial things I've done. So what happened was I walked the literacy coach through a lesson or a problem, like one problem. Jen did this as well at a separate time. And we basically, I explained how to do the problem. I showed my work. I went through the answer, and she sat and she typed. And then that day she went through and she highlighted things in red, highlighted things in yellow, and put in all these questions. And what I realized was I was very detailed in my steps, showing my work, explaining my process, but I never explained why I did that step. What was the reasoning for that step? How did I know to do that step? And as a teacher, we think in a very different way than our students. So this led us to something we call habits of thinking. And the one thing I want you to think is, have you ever stopped to think how you look at a problem compared to how your students look at a problem? Because it's extremely different. We catch on to all these little tricks and side notes of problems, but our students are missing these things. And when we're giving explanations, we're saying, you move this or you solve this, but we don't say why you do it. And constantly now in our teaching, you know, when we ask a question, and I'll give an example to kind of clarify this, you know, we give that what, the why, the how. So we realize as teachers, we have the ability to think mathematically, but what does this mean? And basically, what does this look like? So a lot of time we start seeing our students thinking, they're saying, I don't get it. I don't know how to solve it. What am I supposed to find? They look at a question and they're instantly confused. So we needed to kind of nip this right away. And so we wanted to take the first step, and it began with our preparation. So what we wanted to start doing is creating problems that required deeper thinking instead of just solve for X. You know, we would take, say, a word problem, solve what's your equation, what's your answer, what do your variables represent, what does your answer mean, why did you do this process, what was your process? We created problems that required discussion, engagement, reflection, and explanation. If you walked into one of our math rooms, it's not just math. Our students are reading, our students are writing, they're explaining their answers, they're explaining the process. What we think is if our students can explain and talk, they can understand the problems deeper. And the way the problems are structured affect how the students think mathematically. And yes, this does take time. But once you get like a few people going in on this and helping you out, you can discover these problems a little quicker. So what I would like to do is show you a task that I've done in my geometry class. And what I would do is I give this problem to my students. I say solve for X and then find the measure of angle 3. So I ask myself, what questions come to mind? What information do the students need to know and or understand to solve this particular problem? And, you know, I wanted to see what they could come up with. So I might just give them this problem and say, what do you know? And someone would say, I see some angles. Yeah, you do. Great. You answered that. Good. What else do we see? Parallel lines. Okay, what else? Keep going. And I keep diving deeper and deeper into what they know, because some kids can only answer that question of I see angles. And you're like, you do. Great. And then you kind of dive into it. So here's a completed task example. So, you know, I said solve for X, find the requested angle. We would talk about, well, what angles are you given? You see angles. What are they? Someone might say an acute. Yeah, you have an acute. You have an obtuse, but be more specific. Consecutive interior. Well, what does that mean? They're on the same side of the transversal. Well, what does that mean about them? It means their sum is 180. Okay. Oh, so I add them, you know, and set them equal to 180. That's what I'm trying to get at. Then we start trying to find that missing angle. Well, what do you know about angle 3? Well, it's supplementary to the one angle, or it's an alternate interior to the other, or it's an acute. And you're constantly pulling this information from them. And then we're going into detail of, okay, well, what does this information mean? And we're talking about congruent and their sum. And one problem, you could ask like 10 questions in it, and you'll see the light bulb start clicking. So this is something I've done that I feel has been very beneficial. Another example that I've done, and this is a unit I'm doing right now, is transformations. And before giving them a specific problem, I give them like the guidelines, the steps. So when you keep the X and Y, but you make them opposites, what are you doing? When you keep the X, but you change the Y, oh, you cross the X, you keep the X. And we're talking about reflections and rotations and their meaning. So first I focus on the meaning and what you do to the coordinates, and then we actually do an example. They have to understand the background and the process before doing the problem. And again, this is working on their thinking, their writing, their understanding. And then I go into the actual practice. Okay, you just explained what all this was, so now apply it. So you're trying to get them thinking first and then answer the actual questions that are involved. And then another example here, more with angle pairs. If you look at the left side, before I used to just give them the picture and say, find the missing angle. And they could go through that and do it. But then when I created a more structured way, okay, give me 3 different methods of how you find the measure of angle 7. And if they go with what they know, they could just say alternate exterior are congruent, done. Okay, well, give me more. And they can give me like 4 and 2 are vertical and 2 and 7 are corresponding, and then they can dive into it. So if we make them defend their answer in multiple ways, then they're learning that there isn't always one way and one way only to solve a problem. It also works on their writing, their explaining, their verbal, so they're speaking. So these are types of problems that you would see in our classroom constantly and on a daily basis that we really work hard on.
All right, so sorry, here we go. So one of the things Carrie was kind of getting at is that what we both used to do when we were teaching math is we would teach the math concept, solving equations, or whatever the concept was, and then eventually add in word problems and call it real life. What we learned is that wasn't working for our students, and so now we do the opposite. We go backwards. We first start with a big idea, and we just talk about something that is hopefully more universal, or you can get a picture, or you can make sure no matter what the language is that they can understand the concept there without using the math terms, without using anything, because a lot of these kids are learning English, but also think math is a language on top of itself. So we're asking them to work on 2 languages at once, and it's really difficult. So for example, in Algebra 1, we've been doing slope all year, but we have not used the word slope yet. We have the kids talk about rate of change, how it's constant, how it's increasing, how it's decreasing, how it, the direction. Someone's walking away from home, someone's walking towards home, someone's stopped and they're not moving. And we are constantly talking about that. We're constantly graphing it. We're doing tables. We're doing all of the mathematical content, but they have not used the word slope yet because we want to make sure they understand the concept before we introduce the math term to them. So we do a lot of things like that, or an elevator graph. We introduce solving equations with, buying roses at a flower shop. And we just talk about, the whole scenario and why there's two different shops and we're comparing, and how if you buy 5 flowers, one store might be better versus the other, or t-shirt shop. Or we just talk about that forever, have them write down their own examples before we even go into the actual solving of equations. And so up here are a couple different ideas that we've done in algebra, in geometry, in algebra 2. So for sequences and series, we introduce them with patterns and exponential growth and decay. For quadratics, we start talking about shooting a basketball. We have a video of them shooting a basketball and predicting, will they make the basket or will they not? And just talking about that and what's the important parts and how does that affect making the shot. And so constantly talking about that, constantly using visuals, we build up their understanding of the mathematical concept. And then we start slowly bringing in the math words and actually bringing in the math content. But until they're really understanding of what's going on in the big idea and we use visuals, we don't move on to the next phase. And so right here is an actual example. We just finished this unit. So again, we haven't introduced it as slope yet. We just call it rate of change. But we've talked about elevators, how, if they start in the 10th floor and they go down 2 floors per 1 second and they're graphing that, or what would it look like if they're stopped? Right here, the skateboarder one, we have a skateboarder going back and forth to help predict it. We also would give them a picture like this, and we have the students write their own stories using numbers, using directions. That way they enjoy it more. They bring in their culture, which is really fun to learn and read about, but they're using words, they're using math concepts without using the technical math terms, which is a lot less scary to them and it's a lot less overwhelming. So right here, again, we don't always say, okay, here's the definition for slope. We've talked about rate of change for a very long time. And then we ask them, instead of saying, give the definition, we have them write down, here's a table. What do you know about it? What do you notice about these 3? What's the same? What's different? And we really talk about that before we go into the definition of slope. And even then, we've talked about rate of change. Now we're going to call it something else, which is slope. Instead of just writing down a definition, we give a lot of visuals and explanations in multiple representations. And again, this is another example for Y-INTERCEPT. We call it a starting point. And we have them write down their ideas first. We have them use their words before we refine their words into mathematical correct terms.
So one thing I saw, so Jen really touched base on the vocabulary and about pre-teaching math vocabulary. What we really like to do is, based on all those examples she shared, we try to get the kids to understand the concept first. We explain it kind of in our own words. We show them examples that they can relate to, and then we actually dive into more of the technical term of what everything means. But that's kind of how we do our vocab, because we do all know that math is a separate language, pretty much, we tell our students. So what we'd like to do is share with you a little bit more of our sample work. And if you go to the handouts, what we did was we put together a PDF with a few more examples, some of the ones that were in the slide, and then a few more examples that we have used in our classroom. So the box 2 over from the question and answer has our attachment for the handout. It says webinar packet, and I'm just going to kind of start sharing that, and Jen and I will go through a few of our examples, and then I think we can kind of try to answer some more of your questions in more detail.
All right, so the first page of that packet is really just a condensed version of our presentation. So it's just a summary of everything we've already talked about. But what our goal is in this packet is to kind of show you from a teacher's standpoint what we did. So how did we plan? And then just show you a lot of examples of how we took what we used to do and changed into the structured version, or what we do now is really our big goal.
So if you start going through it, we start off first with some of the geometry tasks. And the first few that are in there are the ones that I actually already discussed in the slideshow. So if you keep going through it on about page 5 or 6, I have a final exam review. And for semester 1, this is my final exam review, and it's the first thing I do when we begin reviewing for finals, and I call it habits of thinking. And basically what I'm doing is I'm not having the students solve any problems whatsoever. I'm having them go through all my topics and fill in what they know and what specific words mean. So for instance, complementary is 90, supplementary is 180. 2 angles on a straight line of 180. So I'm not having them actually go ahead and solve for anything, but instead, dig deep in their understanding and figure out what these things mean. When you keep going down with transformations, when you keep the X and change the Y, don't solve it, but what is that? What type of reflection? You keep going then, and I give more conditional statements and hypothesis and conclusion. And then one thing that I do constantly in my class is where it's dealing with complementary angles. Here we go. Now I can kind of scroll through right here. So if we go through, they're looking at complementary angles like is 90 degrees, and I show them the setup. I don't actually want them to solve, but I want them to remember, how do you set something up? What do these vocab words mean? And then later on, they can solve it after they understand. Alternate interior is congruent, consecutive 180, and we keep going through it. And again, just what type of angle is it? So everything in here is just pulling out their meaning. With this one, the remote interior angles are going to add to equal the exterior, stuff like that. What an isosceles is, what an equilateral triangle is. And again, no solving really, but what do you do? What does this mean? And this packet does take a while, but it's a great start for their final exam review. The next page is all the properties of quadrilaterals, because there's so many that I've had them mark pictures. I then have them give details. I have them fill in blanks about what the actual descriptions for each quadrilateral are, about the sides, the angles, the diagonals, and what each thing means. Then I have them mark the picture, getting them used to what a tick mark looks like, what it means, what an arc of an angle represents, and what it means. So they're practicing marking a picture, so when they see it, they can recognize it. And then Jen is going to kind of go into detail with the algebra tasks. And I know she did cover these in the packet as well, but she will share a couple new ones with you.
So the ones that I want to focus on are something that we're really proud of, is just how we structured our system of equations. And so the first thing I want you to notice is how much reading there is. So we don't take away the words. Sometimes we'll bold things to help them. Sometimes we'll pull out their thinking by asking, okay, after you read this, what have you learned? What do you know? And teach them how to circle and underline. But again, we keep giving them a lot of words and a lot of things to write about. So for step 1, for solving systems, we have them just read many different word problems and then decide from the word problem, is it slope-intercept or standard form, and then write the actual equations down. So the first thought is, why would it be slope-intercept? Why would it be standard? And we have a couple day conversation about why would it be one versus the other. And so once they understand how to choose one, writing the actual equations, the easy part. The struggle that we found was deciding which kind of equation to use. So after we go through that and we feel like they're confident on that, step 2 is, so we did step 1, and now step 2 is reflecting on why you use one form over the other. So again, we're saying you have to defend your answer, otherwise we're not accepting it. And then step 3 is partner reflection. So choose the best method. Is it graphing? Is it substitution? And so really defending their answer, saying there's not one right answer, but you need to defend your answer to prove that yours is the best. And that way, it's fun to watch the students talk to one another and have a conversation or debating about, well, I graph because, both Y's are alone, or maybe substitution is easiest, or can both be good depending on what your skills are and what you prefer. And so it's a great conversation to have. And then we end up with a T chart to really compare and contrast and to talk about it. So right here is an example of just 2 different ones. We show them, we model, slope intercept versus standard form, Y1 versus the other. And then we tell them you have to use all the methods to solve each one, but you can choose. You have 3 methods, but you have to tell me why is this number 1 best with graphing and not with substitution. And so constantly defending their answer, constantly having conversations with their partners, working on their English while adding in the math content is what we're trying to constantly do. And then, sorry, this is a little bit smaller. So thank you, Carrie. So right here, we have them write down when is it best to use each one, because yes, they're all good methods, but we're trying to teach them there's a fastest method. There's a way to be more efficient with your time. And so to teach them that by having the conversations with their partner, instead of upfront saying, you graph when you see this, you use substitution when you see this. Instead, letting them have that experience of defending their answers and coming to the conclusions, and then sharing that with the class and realizing, when one is most efficient versus the other. And so letting them get there versus us telling them, it does take some more time, but it works on their English writing skills. It works on their English speaking skills, their English reading skills, along with the math content. So it all comes together very naturally.
And something about, to touch back on what we talked about in the beginning about the word sheltered, we actually just had a conversation at our last ELL department meeting of should we drop the name sheltered and just call it algebra, but the abbreviation would still be ELL to stand for the course. That class is only ELL students. We don't have any non-ELL students in that class. And, we've talked about dropping the title just because we don't want people to think the course means that it's easier or it's different. We just do things differently, and we try to give more support and guidance. But our curriculum this year, we have been reformatting, and Jen and I have taken charge on that. And every other algebra class is using our curriculum this year. And the other thing that we are trying to pilot this year is an honors part of our curriculum. So a lot of our students still need this ELL support and might struggle if they go to an honors course. However, their math abilities could be an honors level. So we have gone through the algebra honors priority standards and are adding a list into our algebra curriculum. And we are trying to figure out a way to help our students get an honors credit. So we are creating videos and guided notes, a practice packet, and then a separate test. And our students have to complete all of the above and then testing their knowledge on the priority standards. And if they get a certain grade or above, they can earn their honors credit, but they will still complete all of the requirements for an Algebra 1 course. If at the end they are not satisfied with their honors grade or they do not meet a certain requirement, we will not give them the honors credit. However, they can still earn their grade for algebra, if it was a B or an A or whatever that may be. Again, this is a pilot. It's something we are just starting. So this is brand new. So if anybody out there has done anything like this, we would love to hear about it. We are basically the first ones to try this in our department. So, you know, we're kind of curious about that. And Jen, I don't know if you want to add anything in regards to that, but.
I think you covered most of it. The other thing I was going to quickly add is that we learned through this actually that if you can close caption any videos from YouTube or from whatever resource you have, it automatically translates to any single language. It's not perfect, but it gives students an idea. So if you have a student who speaks another language, who's really struggling and can't keep up with the content, another option is to find a video that you know has good explanation and then show them how to close caption and then change to another language. And that might be helpful until they get the English that they need to become successful in your class. But I think that's it. Carrie, anything else?
No, I think that's great. And, you know, we'd love to answer some of your questions if you have any that we haven't covered. And we appreciate everyone for listening to what we have to share. And again, we're still learning and growing every day and attending conferences and trying to get input from other schools. And, you know, like I said, there's only 3 of us between both of our campuses who teach this. And we only run our sheltered courses at one of our schools. So we are doing our best to, you know, help our students and give them the best education possible. So again, if anybody has any questions or input, we would greatly appreciate it. And I see that there are some questions. So we are going to take a peek at this doc really quick and see if we haven't covered anything.
So one of the questions from Eric is, do you use SIOP? And so that's something that was covered in our ELL classes. Definitely we learned from it, but I wouldn't say we specifically use that anymore. We just adapted it to how we best want to use it, what makes sense for us. Sorry. So SIP is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that covers is different, a lot of different components, such as how to prepare lessons, building backgrounds, making sure that it's all put together, all comprehensible, different strategies and interactions with the students, practicing applications, how we deliver the lessons, and reviews and assessments and things such as that is what SIOP is. And so we learned a lot from that structure in all of our ELL classes. But again, we took all the best parts that we thought were useful for our students and we applied it in a way that works best for us in our math teaching now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jessica Palmer, have you found that ELL students in the sheltered class are put at any disadvantage from not having the opportunity to interact with their peers who are more experienced with their English language? And Jen touched on this a little bit earlier. You know, it's amazing how quickly these students learn English and grow. Like I said, my student who came in from Bulgaria who spoke no English, by even after the November, her English was already great. And then the end of her first year, it was incredible. Her senior year, you wouldn't have known that she had just moved to the US, which is kind of amazing. And we really don't think that they have any disadvantage. You know, it would be nice maybe for them to interact with more peers outside of the ELL program. However, once they hit a certain level, a lot of times we are sending them out of the sheltered classes into a regular ed class. They still have PE with other kids. They still have certain classes. And, you know, a lot of times they can start getting out of the ELL science, or they can, you know, get into a regular English class. And as they advance in high school, they slowly start kind of losing that ELL label, I guess, on their actual schedule and their courses. You know, getting them to interact with everyone in the school.
And then we kind of touched on this as well, but as Diane was asking, how do you go about pre-teaching math vocabulary? So again, we start with the concept, something that's more universal, something everyone can relate to and understand before we even touch any kind of vocab. And then once we know they understand the concept, then we introduce the vocabulary, so that way they can put, you know, a concept, a picture with a word, because it's not always, you know, words in English that are the best way for us to convey information. And if we notice that they still don't understand math vocab, sometimes we'll give them, you know, vocab packets or some vocab to practice. But what we'll do is we'll give them a word. We'll first have them write it down in their own words. So we want to make sure that they do not go to, you know, online and just copy down a definition. I want them to explain in their own words. Doesn't have to be mathematical. And then we also have them draw a picture or an example or some kind of image to prove that they know where they see this in the math world. And so that way, it really helps bringing together all the concepts. So that way, if they struggle, explaining in their own words, we know, okay, they don't really understand this. Let's go back to the beginning concept and then pull out their thinking to help them get to that point.
Yes, good. I've never used an anchor chart. Jen, have you?
I have not either. No.
So this is maybe something that we can look into. So if anybody's had success with an anchor chart or have used one before, we have not. So definitely something for us to look into and kind of see a little bit more about that. And going with kind of tying in Diane and Carol's question here, like covering the same content and being able to focus on reading and writing. I think as teachers, the constant struggle is how to get through all the content. When can you slow down? Do we have time to cover this material more if I have to keep moving on and on? And I think that working on the reading and the writing in the beginning definitely does take a little bit longer, but it has such a big advantage and they get used to it that I don't think it slows us down. I actually think it enhances their understanding. Constantly asking them, why did you do that? What are you doing? Explain that process. It is an extra question or two, but you can do it verbally. You can have them read aloud. You can have them write it down for their homework. You can have them do a quick reflection. You can do it in a variety of ways that I don't think it takes away from the actual content. I only think it enhances it. So it's definitely something that in the beginning was a struggle for us to get used to. And now it's something we do all the time and we love it. So.
And again, we're not focusing on can they read and write appropriately. We're just making sure that they can write down words, write down their ideas. And sometimes at first it might be a 1 or 2 word, might be their whole sentence. And we're okay with that. It's just that we're slowly going to expand on that as well. So it's not a focus, it's an addition to make sure they understand the math content.
Yes. We allow our students to speak in their language. I actually love hearing them speak in their language. We learn about all the different languages they speak, countries they're from, when did you move here? Do you have siblings? Are you here alone? We love learning about their background. So we never tell a student that they're not allowed to speak in their own language. Our students have Chromebooks. They use Google Translate a lot, and we are okay with that. We are testing them on their math skills and not their ability to answer the question appropriately in English. If they need to say it in Spanish and have their friend translate their question to us or their answer, we're okay with that because we know that as time passes, their English is only going to get better. And then honestly, we're building a relationship with them because we're learning about their language. And, Jen and I, we try to speak Spanish. It's the most popular language and we are terrible at it, but our kids appreciate it. We have high Polish speakers, but I don't speak Polish at all. We have a variety of languages, as you see. So if that's what they need to feel comfortable, we will let them speak in their language. Absolutely.
But then we also always support that they speak and make sure that their partner or that their friends or whoever understand it in whatever language they speak. But what we push is that together they write it in English, even if that's typing into Google Translate, they're still learning a little bit more while working on the math skills. And it's just fun to see, like Carrie was saying, I've had students, who speak Polish and fell in love with a girl who speaks Spanish. So before he learns English, he learns Spanish. So it's a really fun community to be a part of.
Yes. And that when we group them up or pair them up, we don't always stick to languages. Just because you have 2 Spanish speakers, it's nice to intermix it and throw someone who speaks Bulgarian in there because they teach each other and, they can still help each other with the math. And it's a little bit more of a struggle for them at times, but it really also helps get them more comfortable. Word walls, I'm trying to do one this year and I always fail at them, but I'm trying really hard. And right now my word wall just has by unit the words that we covered. It does not give definitions. It does not give pictures. It's more so these are all the words that we are covering in one unit, and then the next unit and the next. So then as a whole picture, they can look and see every word they have to know, understand, and recognize, and the meaning. Again, I've never really done one in the past, so I'm going to see kind of where I go with it. And if it's beneficial or if it's not. So if anybody has experience with it, you know, or what you do with yours, please share. But again, I'm kind of new to that. So.
And then Grace asked, what are your honors designation standards? So, and if you have more questions about this, I would love to talk more and to share ideas about what you've done or what you think. Because again, this is something we're just trying this year, but we looked at the priority standards in regular and in honors. And then we just added in the honors ones, but we don't go in the same order. So that was kind of the challenge, is finding how do we change up the order, make their order or their extra standards fit into our curriculum. But it was little changes like adding in domain and range and interval notation, but there are some bigger standards as well. So if you want to talk about that more, please reach out. We'd love to discuss that with you.
Mm-hmm. And we don't do any different grading. We might actually grade their writing portions a little easier, but the math content of it is all graded as if you grade in, you know, a non-ELL class. I hate to say, you know, a regular ed classroom, but we are looking that they know the math, they understand the math, and the explaining and that addition is, you know, just something that we're looking for a little bit more on our own. So. Yeah.
Are there any other questions we haven't covered? It looks like I think we've covered most of them.
That is good. Thank you very much, Corey and Jen, for sharing with us. And thank you, everyone, for in attendance. Their emails are up there, so please email and reach out if you have questions or have ideas. I'm sure that it sounds like that they're open to that too, of learning as well. So thank you both. Next week, we have activities in the AP math classroom for AP Calc teachers and AP Stats teachers. If you'd like to join us for that, that would be great. Just a quick description of that is they'll be talking about different types of activities that can add pizzazz to your lessons. Again, thank you so much for attending. And again, thank you so much to our presenters for sharing with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.